All right, the Sermon on the Mount, or as Luke has it, the Sermon on the Plain, because it's a very flat place. Now we are here on our timeline. We're about to have our very final Sunday of Epiphany, and then we're going to be starting Lent, which means that Fat Tuesday is coming up also with Punchkis. I don't know where that fits on the liturgical calendar. Fat Tuesday on the liturgical calendar. I think it's somewhere in there, but I'm not sure. I think it is the Wednesday before Lent is Fat Tuesday, because that's when you fill up on all the stuff before you have to do the fasting of all the stuff, or something like that. But Fat Tuesday is not officially in the actual calendar of liturgical events. We added that, but it's fun anyways. So that's where we're at. Next week is Transfiguration Sunday. Epiphany ends with the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus climbs the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and then he's transfigured into clothes shining bright white, and there's a voice from heaven that says some things. So we're going to go over that next week and what that means, but today we have a teaching from Jesus. And this teaching is a really difficult teaching of Jesus, because it says, love your enemies. But he didn't really mean that, right? Like, that's really hard. We don't want to do that. Like, loving enemies is not how we roll. That's not. There's other scripture passages that we don't take into consideration as well. Like, we don't. But here's the thing. Those people that say, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. You know, that's not true. That's not true. We adopt that phrase for the scriptures we like. And then we don't. Everyone's a biblical literist until they get to the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus says, love your enemies. And you're like, wait a second. But he didn't really mean that. See, what he meant was, and then they'll fill in the blanks. So biblical literist says, is it like his bumper sticker, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. But what we don't understand is there are things that God said in the Bible that we don't believe it, and it doesn't settle it, and we just kind of like skip over them. So I put together top 10 biblical laws that we don't obey. Are you ready for this? These are the top 10 biblical laws that we do not obey. But they're in there. And if this whole biblical literist, God said it, that I believe it, that settles it kind of a thing, we got a lot of work to do. Or we just have some reflection to do. Okay, first one. Top 10 ignored biblical laws. Are you ready for this? No mixed fabrics can be worn. Leviticus 19:19 says, do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Only straight up wool for me, thank you. I actually watched a preacher say, I do not have the two sisters in my closet, Polly and Esther. That was funny. It was funny. I thought it was cute. Okay, so, is anyone here wearing mixed fabric? I am. I'm in trouble. I am in trouble with this one. Leviticus 19:19. But God said it. I believe it. That settles it. Except that one. But we'll see what that actually meant was. Then we explain this one away. Okay, next one. No shrimp. Who's bummed out? I mean, who's bummed out right now? I love cocktail shrimp at holiday parties. They forgot to devein these guys. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. As a former cook, yeah. All creatures in the seas or streams that do not have fins and scales, whether among all the swarming things or among all the other living creatures in the water, you are to regard as unclean. Leviticus 11:10. So all of you shellfish, lobster, clams, oysters, all that good stuff, I am sorry. But God said it. I believe it. That settles it. Oh, wow. I guess we got some things to add to our list of stuff we got to be paying attention to. Okay. I am going to be very guilty of this next one. Do not trim your beard or sideburns. Anybody here shave today? Is this only for men? I'm sorry. Leviticus 19:27. Do not cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard. And that's the part that I do clip off. I learned from a barber how to tame the madness that is this beard. And I went to a barber once, and it's just like when a plumber came to my house, I paid attention, and now I don't call the plumber anymore. So now I went to the barber, and I paid attention, and I was like, okay, now I know how to trim a beard. but I guess I'm in contradiction to scriptures. But God said it, I believe it, that settles it, kind of a thing. Oh well. Okay, you ready for a tough one? Here it is. If you work on Saturday, you must die. Exodus 35:2 says, for 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day, which is Saturday, not Sunday, shall be your holy day, a Sabbath of the rest of the Lord. Whoever does any work on it must be put to death. God said it. Did anybody work yesterday? We're going to gather in the hall later. Everyone get some rocks. God said it. Wait, we're going to explain that one away really quickly. Okay, this one's, some of you who are vegetarian are going to love this next one. Some of you who are not. No bacon. No bacon, sausage, or pork chops. Anyone have bacon or sausage for breakfast? Oh, we got some people in violation of God's law here. Leviticus 11:7-8. And the pig. Look how cute he is. Though it has a divided hoof, does not chew the cud, it's unclean for you. You must not eat their meat or touch their carcasses. Oh, man. No BLTs? Oh, man. Okay. But God said it, I believe it, that settles it, kind of a thing. Oh, this is a tough one. Any younger folks in the room are going to be, disobedient teens must die. Deuteronomy 21:18-21. If someone has a stubborn, rebellious son, I guess ladies, you know, who does not obey his father and mother, all the men of his town are to stone him to death. Okay. Whoa. I don't think I would have made it past my teenage years if we read this one. Okay, but those are Old Testament. Those are Old Testament. New Testament, we listen to that one, right? Women can't speak in church. Oh my goodness. 1 Corinthians 14. Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission as the law says. God said it. I'm not gonna, sorry. I'm not gonna uphold that one. I'm gonna get hit, or someone's gonna come. I won't even see it coming. Okay, but guys, I got one for you. If you sin, you lose that part of your body. This one is directly from Jesus. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Okay, we got two more. This one is for all of us. And it's awkward. Are you ready for an awkward one? Kiss each other in greeting at church. Kiss. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Romans 16:16. Oh my. I shook your hand when you came in, but I did not smooch anybody. Am I in violation of the New Testament? Paul wrote Romans, right? Like that's very, we like the Paul. Pre-COVID. Yeah, that's pre-COVID. Now the COVID's here. We don't listen to that one. Okay. And last one, you cannot have jewelry or your hair done up. Oh my. This is right out of 1 Timothy 2:9. It says, I also want the women to dress modestly with decency and propriety, adorning themselves not with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothes. Oh, but you can't have clothes that are single woven without buying expensive clothes. And now, oh my gosh, my brain just went. I'm clutching my pearls, but I'm not allowed to wear pearls. Never mind. So you can see that whole biblical literist thing that says God said it, I believe it, that settles it, falls apart really fast when you dive into different portions of the scripture that we don't actually apply that to. Nobody applies that mentality to the entire Bible because you can't. And actually this was a problem in Jesus' day too, because they would say, well, which one? They'd ask Jesus, what's the most important commandment? That question, when translated from how they spoke into how we speak, is more like, well, which commandments have more weight to them that we should treat with a little bit more regard? And the entire story of the Good Samaritan is Jesus saying, well, you think don't touch a dead or dying thing law has more weight to it than love your neighbor as yourself. And I'm switching those things around. It was a hot debate in Jesus' day, which you can't keep all the commandments because in keeping one, you break 4. And so nobody has this straight up biblical literist approach. So then what are we supposed to do with the scriptures? There's a couple of thoughts here. The most explained away teaching of Jesus is the Sermon on the Mount. Like, we all know that we have to explain some of these passages that are just weird and they sound awkward and they don't apply to us in their context anymore. But Jesus' core teaching, he says, if you want to be my follower, oftentimes this one is explained away. Love your enemies as yourself. And, let someone smack you on the other side of the face if they hit you once. And take your coat too and don't sue them back. And all this other stuff. It's the most explained away saying of Jesus. And we'll say, well, he didn't mean it. Or it only applies to individuals and not groups and nations. And it's not applied to people groups. Or we just say, well, what's Sermon on the Mount? I don't read that. I just read Paul. And that's what we say. Like, hey, did you read this letter from Paul? Let's distract ourselves with that. But the thing is, nobody actually obeys the entire Bible. No one ever has, no one ever will, because it's impossible. And so what do we do with it? Passages like this. Everyone picks and chooses which scriptures to integrate into their belief and which ones to exclude. This is just how it works, because we need something that works for our life today. Women staying silent in church and having no pearls and done-up hair doesn't work in today's society, right? We don't adopt that one. Loving your enemies, is that one that we should adopt or explain away? See, this is one of the big questions. But here's where we go. Is your purpose in doing so to enforce a religious mandate for all of humanity, or, this is the big one, or to adopt a spiritual practice that enables you to better replicate the life of Christ? See, which scriptures do we want to adopt into our life? Well, it depends on what you want to do with them. Do you want to uniformly do a blanket, whole religious mandate for all of humanity that everyone must believe and obey all of the things that I have figured out, and it's an external use of scripture on others that's really hard to actually do yourself? Or are you trying to adopt a spiritual practice that enables you to replicate the life of Christ in your own? The way that we answer this question is how we treat the scriptures. So if we're trying to replicate the life of Christ in us, then we can look at some of those previous ones and say, well, those aren't so important. But if I look at the Sermon on the Mount, then it's like, well, that one's really important if I want to replicate the life of Christ. If I just want to do a religious mandate for all of humanity to conform to, then all of a sudden I have to pick and choose which ones are going to make sense to then go and enforce on other people. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is one of those central core teachings of Jesus that I think is really important that we understand. And one of my favorite scriptural expositors is by the name of Howard Thurman. I quoted him quite a bit here. He actually said this about the Sermon on the Mount. He said, Christianity, as it was born in the mind of Jesus, appears as a technique of survival for the oppressed. That it became through the intervening years a religion of the powerful and dominant, used sometimes as an instrument of oppression, must not tempt us into believing that it was thus in the mind and life of Jesus. Whoa, okay, so if we use this sentence to then go and interpret the Sermon on the Mount, how is the Sermon on the Mount a technique of survival for oppressed people? That is the main question here. How do we love our enemies? How is loving our enemies a technique of survival for the oppressed? And that's what we're going to dive into and explore today on the Sermon on the Mount. So part 1, subversion. Jesus is getting really subversive with this teaching. It says this, I say to you, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who asks of you. And if anyone takes away what is yours, do not ask for it back again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Sounds like a little bit of doormat theology, doesn't it? Like, I'm just going to let people walk all over me and try and repress all of the feelings I have about being taken advantage of, right? On surface values appears to be that way. But if we go back to Howard Thurman's statement, this is a technique of survival for the oppressed, then we start to say, now I see what's going on here. So how do we love our enemies here as a technique of survival for the oppressed people? We have to get in the minds of the people who are oppressed. And to do that, I think one of the most helpful resources I found was this guy here, Martin Luther King Jr. In 1957, he gave a sermon at Howard University in Washington, D.C., entitled Loving Your Enemies. And in the introduction, he actually asked the question, how do we do this? And he gave this down in 57 in D.C. Now this here, let's go back to the scripture. Love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you. Who is mistreating the people hearing this message right now? Like these people here, hearing the words of Jesus, who is their big, oppressive, mistreating force in their life? There's a whole bunch of soldiers walking around with armor and swords and shields and battalions of them all over the place. And they really don't have a lot of rights. And so they are, if they fight back in any way, they're dead. There's no court system, there's no trial, there's no, well, let me explain myself, there's nothing. Any kind of resistance on their side gets them killed. Immediately on the spot, and nobody is going to blink an eye. Because they're just little, they're just the Hebrew people, and they're not Romans, they're not citizens of Rome, we just gonna, swipe them down. So if anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other side. And I've taught on this before, and if you're new here, then you can hear the explanation for this. If somebody strikes you on the cheek, offer the other side. In Matthew, it gives a specific reference to what side of the face you're being hit on. And he says, if somebody hits you on the side of your face, in the world of that day, to hit someone on that side of their face with your dominant hands means that you're going to backslap them. Now, if you backslap somebody, that's very different than like punching them in the nose, right? Like if you punch somebody right directly in the face or in the nose, you're like, this guy's a threat, and I gotta subdue the threat. If you just kind of backslap somebody, that's very demeaning, isn't it? Now, if you are a Hebrew person in this day, you have absolutely no rights, and a Roman soldier comes up to you and backslaps you, and you fall on the ground. What do? You want to rise up and you just want to like jack the guy right in the jaw with your fist, right? But if you do that, what happens? A sword's going to come at you real fast, and you're going to die. And so nobody knew what to do. They were just like, I don't know what to do, but they keep like smacking us around and hitting us. And Jesus gives these people a way to stand up and reclaim their dignity as humans. I don't know if you've ever experienced bullying, maybe at school when you were younger, but it's a very demeaning thing. If you feel powerless to stand up to the bully that has like bullying you. And these actually methods are ways to stand up to a bully. And here it is, like this back slap from the Roman soldier. Can you imagine the person standing up and saying, if you're going to hit me, do it as an equal. Hit me right here. And then all of a sudden he has to like hit him, not with a back slap like this, but like a pow. That's going to make him think twice about what he just did. He's going to say, wait a second. This guy just stood up and asked for another one, but in like a man-to-man kind of a way, to use that term. Like if somebody backslaps you and you stand on the floor, don't let them do that. Now you can't fight back, they're going to kill you, but you stand up and say, I'm going to reclaim my dignity as a human being, and I'm going to say, if you're going to hit me like an equal. Now the Roman soldier who just experienced that is going to be, whoa, what do I do with that? Like no one's ever done that. Now technically not fighting back, technically not breaking any laws, he's going to think twice about hitting you again. Oh, that's the person that did that thing and stood right back up and said, hit me like an equal. Like, I'm not going to think like I can just, backhand these people around like they're animals or something. So as a way that Jesus said, don't let people walk all over you. No, you stand up, you reclaim your dignity as a human being, and you say, if you're going to hit me, you hit me like an equal. You see how this is a tool for the oppressed to stand up to an oppressive force that would otherwise kill them if they violently took up a sword and said, I'm just going to kill you for doing that. They'd end up dead. But Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you a tool here to do something. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, off the other. If someone takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Now, This is very different in our day and age. We got to look at like how they dress. Now, how they dress is they have an overcoat and then like an undercoat, and then they have kind of like a wrap. They don't have like, briefs or something. They have like this wrap that wraps as underwear kind of a thing. Almost looks like a diaper, but I'm not going to say that. I said it. Okay. But that's how they did clothes back in those days. They didn't have like elastic and, all that stretchy kind of stuff. So they just had to do like wrapping and tucking kind of a thing. Now, if somebody takes your coat and you're going to say, oh, you want my coat? Here you go. If you're taking everything from me, you might as well take this too. And then you're just standing in court, like mostly naked. Now, wouldn't that be embarrassing? Wouldn't you feel like shame? Like I'm just standing here like 90% naked and everybody's looking at me? That would feel really awkward. In our age, the person who is like exposed absorbs the shame. In that age, it's different. In that age, it is reversed. If you look on somebody's nakedness, if you remember the story of Noah, they accidentally stumble in and Noah's like drunk and on the floor naked, and he's like, whoa, what happened here? Noah wasn't the one who absorbed the shame, but the people who came in and saw it. That's how it worked. And so what you're doing, if somebody steals from you in court your cloak, they're like, well, you might as well take this too. And then you're standing there, and the guy's like, no, I didn't want that. I just wanted this. He's like, hey, I owe you money, I guess. And debtor's like, oh, man, if you owe debt, you're going to prison, all this stuff. She's like, I got to give you everything. You want this too? And then all of a sudden, the shame is not on the person who is disrobing, but all the people who are looking at it. And so then you're walking down the street, going back to your house, like half naked, and everyone's going to be like, who took his coat? And he's going to be like, oh, Jim Bob over there did. It's like, how did he do that? Why did he do that? That's horrible. The shame is on the person who took the cloak, and you're offering it freely and saying, so this is a way for people who owed money to other people that was probably unjust that they owed the money there, to then heap the shame on them and say, well, look at all this money I owe you. Here's my cloak. Here's this. You want this too? And then it's like, whoa, hold on. Are they going to take you to court next time? Probably not going to want to take you to court next time. It's like, remember what happened last time? Like, we were the talk of the town, and it was a really bad thing. So that was the thing. And if anyone takes what's yours, don't ask for it back again. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So Martin Luther King Jr. says this: in order to love our enemies, we must seek to discover the element of good within those persons that hate us. Whether we realize it or not, each of us is something of a schizophrenic personality. We are split up. We are divided against ourselves. There is something of a civil war going on within the being of every individual. Somehow, the recalcitrant south of our souls is always warring against the north of our souls. That is, in this civil war that continually goes on, we are divided against ourselves. So when Jesus comes in and says, love our enemies, we're like, that's hard. That's really hard. I'd rather just take them out. I'd rather just, right? So we try to explain it away. Yeah, but love your enemies. And we say, yeah, but, right? Yeah, I know we said that, but turn the other cheek. Do good to those who hate you. And then we say, well, yeah, but he also made a whip and drove people out of the temple. Yeah. Oh, he also said he's coming in Revelation with a bloody sword that's like really rough. And he's also said to sell your cloak and to buy a sword. So we have these yeah, but kind of things that then explain away the sayings of Jesus without diving into what Jesus is actually saying here. So we tend to dismiss the passages that make us feel powerless and adopt the passages that make us feel powerful and then wield those ideas as weapons in defensive posture. But if we actually say, this is a tool for those who are experiencing some kind of oppression as a way to reclaim your human dignity, your ego can actually relax a little bit and you're not going to weaponize your beliefs and values against other people. So a Roman officer backhands you like a street dog, you stand up and say, strike me like an equal. If a rich person sues you for your coat, you give him your undercoat as well and walk out the room naked. These are tasks that you can do that reclaim human dignity and put the shame on the person who's oppressing. Not in order to defeat them, but in order for them to have a big spotlight put on what they are doing and saying, I am demeaning myself in these actions as well. And Jesus is giving them a second way out, saying you don't have to demean, you don't have to be demeaned, and then you don't have to demean other people in order to win and reclaim your dignity. You can actually treat your oppressors as human beings and highlight their actions as evil in hopes that they wake up to how evil they are treating you. So there are ways that we can put the spotlight off of us and what's wrong with me and why do I have to endure all this stuff, and put it on the person that is our perceived enemy so that they can then see for themselves what their actions are doing and hopefully wake up and say, oh, you stop doing that. This teaching gave non-violent options to the oppressed Hebrew people, a way to take back their dignity. Because desperation is dangerous. Desperation is going to lead them to a violent insurrection in 70 AD that brought the Romans down upon their head. And this is what Jesus is trying to divert. All of the passages of judgment, all of the passages of woe unto you, all those passages are as Jesus trying to get them to give up their violent mentality of, if we can just wage war on the Romans and win, we'll be great and God will help us. And Jesus is saying, it's not going to happen. Adopt these nonviolent practices, or if you wage war against Rome, Rome is going to come down and destroy your temple. And in 64 AD, they did not listen to Jesus' words. And in 64 AD, they waged war on the Romans. It lasted about 6 years. And in 70 AD, Caesar got tired of it and sent a big, massive battalion down and totally, utterly obliterated the entire city of Jerusalem, burned it to the ground, and tore down their beloved temple, around which their whole economy and culture and religion and governance all rotated around. And it was utterly destroyed in 70 AD. The biggest trauma to hit these people. And Jesus was trying to divert them from these actions, saying, I know you're desperate. I know that you're sick of it. I know that you're angry. I know that you have this rage inside of you. But if you wage war this way, they're more powerful than you, and they will crush you. I'm giving you non-violent ways to do what you want to do. And hopefully it changes both you and the person that's oppressing you and helps wake both of you up. That's what the Sermon on the Mount is. So on surface, it sounds like be a doormat. Let other people walk all over you. But when you dive into its actual roots in the culture, it is more of non-violent options for oppressed people to take their dignity back. That's what Jesus is trying to do here. And then he calls a lot of people sinners. Well, even sinners do that, right? He says it right here. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that for you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend for those who you expect to receive payment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. The term sinner in our head is theological. In their mind, it was different. It wasn't a theological category of people who don't go to church. Sinner was different. Sinner, as the church lady once said. Anybody here like the church lady from SNL? All right. She was one of my favorite characters of SNL. Sinner is a civil and social descriptor for these people. It's not a theological moral assessment. Sinner is it's a social descriptor. It's a civil descriptor of a certain kind of people. What kind of people were they? It's Luke's favorite word. He uses sinner 18 times, which is way more than the other Gospels combined. And the people, he uses it to describe the people that Jesus likes to hang around. He likes to hang around with sinners and tax collectors. Those are the two categories. What is a sinner? That's the thing. What is a sinner? Sinner is a social descriptor of outsiders who have not found an avenue into public places of worship. Now, the things that do not allow them access might be their profession, like they're a tax collector or a prostitute, or perhaps because they have a disability or sickness, or they're in a poverty situation. These people didn't have access to worship. They weren't allowed to attend the church services because if you're in poverty and you accidentally make something of those 316 laws, or 613 laws, 613 laws in Leviticus, you break one of those, you got to figure out, like, it was like the IRS doing your taxes that time of year, you know? Does anyone here know all the tax laws? I don't know all the tax laws. I got to hire a professional, right? And then they know the tax laws, and then they'll do all my tax papers, submit them, and then hopefully it's all good. I cross my fingers, like, I hope, no audits and all this other good stuff. We need professionals because the tax code is we can't understand it all. It was the same for the religious code. If you touched a dead body, you buried your uncle because he passed away, and you're like, well, now I'm unclean, I can't go to it. How do I get clean? I don't know, you got to hire a Pharisee. They'll tell you how to do it. I don't have enough money for that. I guess I'm a sinner now. I am a social descriptor of someone who has no avenue back into worship. Or it's just my job, like tax collector or prostitute. These are ways that people had to make money. And like, well, you're not allowed in because you're constantly unclean because of the job you do. So you're not allowed in here either. Or if you're somebody with a disability, like somebody who is blind or by the side of the road, or you had a sickness. All of these things, you could not figure out how to get back into the places of worship. So you were an outsider, you were a sinner. And these are the people that Jesus goes and hangs around. Are the people who just can't get it together religiously. Not all of the people who like have this, display of I have everything all together and I've put it all together and I'm a very good person. And Jesus didn't hang out with those people. He's like, I guess they're good. I'm going to go hang out with the people that need to hear what I got to say and tell them that God is actually available as much as water. That it's not in this little tiny room in the temple, and that's the only place you can go once a year to encounter God. But they're like out in the fields. They're out in the farmlands. They're out under the blue sky. And he's like, yeah, God's here too. You don't have to have this whole temple system and all the people and pay your money to get into the thing, to do the thing, and have all. He's like, no, God's here, right around us. The kingdom of God is within you and around you, he was actually saying. That was very radical to say. So he gives this sermon on the plain, which is really interesting because he's like, well, even sinners do that. That's not derogatory, it's leveling. It raises people up and saying they're doing a good task of being a human. And then all these people that think they're higher up are being brought down. And it's the Sermon on the Plain, which is the flat level place. Now, in Matthew, it's the Sermon on the Mount because mountains are important to Hebrew people. And he's saying he's another Moses. He's on the mountain. He's teaching. He's bringing the thing back to us. Jesus goes up the mountain on this one and then comes back down and teaches on a flat place. And Luke's like what Luke wants to do with that, I'm tripping over my words today. That motion from coming down to the flat level place is a theological statement, not just a descriptor of the GPS location that he is. He's saying everybody's coming to God on level ground here, even these people that you label sinners, even the people that you label outsiders. He's saying, even if you just love those who love you, if you just do good to those who do good to you, he's like, yeah, everybody can do that. That's just called being a good human being. I'm asking you to be a different kind of human being altogether. Now, here's the thing. We gather under a banner that we are passionate about, and we wage war on the banners that others are gathered under that oppose us, and then win. When we win, we just merely switch out who is in power without dealing with the abusive system of power that is evil to begin with. Now, this can be seen in a fun way with sports rivalries, right? We got Michigan fans and we got state fans. And there's just like right? There's Michigan, there's Ohio. There's all of these like rivalries that are classic. The Lions and the Bears, right? Those are fun ways that we can play out these banner things. There's people that dress in these colors, there's people that dress in those colors, and then we can have fun with that. But then when it crosses those lines into things that have our identity and our value tied up in them, like our political affiliations, our religious affiliations, all these, we gather under our banners, and then we wage war on the people that are gathered under the other banners, whether it's verbally or whatever. And we say, oh, they're horrible people, they're awful people because they're different than me. And I'm gathered under this banner, and if everyone would just come here, then we wage war on our enemies. And Jesus is saying, that's the problem. The problem isn't the banner that you're gathered under. The problem is that you're waging war on people who have different banners than you. And he's saying, because as soon as one side wins, they just switch out oppressors. They did this in Rome, like when they finally defeated the Greeks, right around 160 BC, before Jesus. And then they came to power again, and they were 3 times as abusive to their own people, the Hasmonean monarchy. They were like, we are Hebrew people, we get to govern ourselves again. And they were 3 times as oppressive as the Greeks were to them. And then by the time the Romans come to town, they're like, please, get these guys out of there. They're horrible, right? They're just switching out oppressors every time because it's not loving our enemies, it's waging war upon them and then winning. And then we never switched out the evil power system that's there. We just occupy it in the same manner as the person before us and then wield it on a different group of people. That repetitive cycle is what keeps killing us all over and over and over again. Martin Luther King Jr. had wisdom for this. He said there's another thing that you must do to love your enemy. When the opportunity presents itself for you to defeat your enemy, and this opportunity will present itself sooner or later, you must not do it. For love, in the final analysis, means understanding creative goodwill to all people. It simply means that you will do nothing to defeat anybody. You work to defeat evil systems, but not individuals who are caught up in those evil systems. This is the meaning of love. And I believe this is what Jesus means when he said, love your enemies. That you seek to defeat no individual, that you only seek to uplift them. That's hard, but that's coming from a man who walked the talk and was assassinated for it. Like, I think he has some authority to tell us how to do this. Now the last section, do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Give and it will be given to you. Good measure, shaken down, all that good stuff. See, love your enemies refuses to degrade anyone, oppressed or oppressor. Nobody gets degraded. Everyone gets to be a human. I like what Rowan Williams, the guy with the greatest eyebrows in all of human history, said. Pride is the assumption that you can only flourish at the expense of somebody else. Ouch. That hurts. Hits you right in the sternum, doesn't it? Pride is the assumption that you can only flourish at the expense of somebody else. So here's the thing. No one is infallible, and nobody needs to be infallible. When we set down that fear, honestly, look inward and do our own work, we find ourselves much more at peace, less susceptible to judgment, and able to love like God loves. That's the work. So these whole, adopting scriptures, either as a way to have a whole thing that everyone must conform to, and then you wield it upon the human race, or are we adopting scriptures that help us replicate the life of Christ in us, in our little circles of influence? That's the major key here. So I got a couple of reflection questions, and then I have a spiritual practice for us to try this week. So, reflection questions. First one, what am I afraid someone will find out about me? If you can answer that question there, you're going to solve a lot of problems in your life. If you can honestly answer that question, a lot of problems will be solved. How does this fear project into reactive hatred of another? That's the big, big question. Okay, spiritual practice. Love people without assessing their worth. That one's hard. That one's really hard. Reclaim your dignity from an oppressor in these ways that Jesus kind of spells out for us. So those are a couple of things that you can think about and some things that you can actually do this week. Now, our passage, our benediction is Psalm 37 from Malcolm Guite. I don't know if it's going to be on the screen. I don't know what's going on. Some of it is, some of it isn't. There it is. All right. I'll fret no more for passing wickedness, no more than for the new mown grass that fades to leave room for the growth and tenderness of fresh green leaves, the cool, inviting glades of my new life in you, my heart's desire. The true sun rises now, and soon the shades that last, black shades of night, will back retire and mix no more with good. Then I will sing the song of my redemption in that choir, where I, whom you have made, at last can bring my song to its beginning and its end. Till then, I'll be content with each small thing your love provides. And let the rich contend with one another for their fading wealth, for I have found my God and my true friend. Psalm 37, retold by Malcolm.